So my colleagues have been to the floor here for the past little bit here talking about various road trips in their state, destinations, favorite destinations. And so when you think about where's your favorite place, it's like saying which sun is your favorite sun. Of course, we all have our favorite places all around our state. But I got to thinking about road trips, and I thought, well, road trips in Alaska perhaps take a little bit of a different meaning than in other states. I come from a state, we all know, we talk about it a lot, Senator Sullivan and I come from a big state. We've got over 663,000 square miles, but within those 663,000 square miles, we don't have a lot of roads. Over 82% of the communities in the state of Alaska are not connected by roads. We're not part of the road system. So traveling in Alaska can be a little bit of an adventure. Flexibility is always key. And more often than not, what you do when you're in a big state is you move around from town to town and you rely on the commercial carriers. You rely on Alaska Airlines, you rely on Raven, you rely on some of the others, but it's pretty much moving around by air. But sometimes it isn't possible to get around by air all the time. Sometimes we have what I call forced road trips. Not that I don't want to be on our roads, but once you get on the roads, you're on them for a fairly long time. And sometimes the jets don't fly. Sometimes the jets don't fly because you've got weather. Sometimes the jets don't fly because you have a volcano that goes off. I was holding a field hearing in Fairbanks and needed to get down to Anchorage, and Pavlov blew. Pavlov is one of our more active volcanoes, and it shuts down the airspace. So what was going to be an hour trip home was, or a 45-minute trip home, turned out to be a 359-mile drive home, 7 hours that evening. We had another trip going out of Valdez to Anchorage, needed to get back to Anchorage that night, but the fog and the wind in Valdez says there's no planes that are coming in to take you out, and they might not be there the next day, and they might not be there the next day after that. There's bad weather, the pass is shutting down, and so you better move now. So you get in a car, and 300 miles later, 5 hours later, you are in Anchorage. I had Senator Manchin with me just over the 4th of July break, and we were headed from Anchorage to King Salmon to attend a ribbon cutting for a National Park Service facility. And we got fogged out in the morning and waited for hours in the airport, and then got word that the fog had lifted and we're getting ready to get on a plane, but then they call a mechanical. And if there's a mechanical, I'm with you, we just don't fly. So Senator Manchin turned to me and he says, I know it's a long way, but can't we just drive there? And that was my opportunity to turn to my colleague in another learning moment and tell him, nope, this is one of those 82% of our communities where there is no road. So Joe, we're not flying. So aviation really is our lifeline here. And if you're not on Alaska Airlines, you are on one of our many, many bush carriers. This is a picture of a pilot that I had an opportunity to fly with, Eric, who's the pilot and the owner of Arctic Backcountry Flying Service. This is his Cessna 206. But more often than not, these are the type of aircraft that we are in. We're not flying in some fancy leased jet. We're in a small, what we call bush carrier. That's when we have airstrips that we can land on, but we don't have airstrips in many of our communities. What we do is we come in and out on the water, on our float planes. Some people call them seaplanes out here. We call them float planes. So here's a picture of me and Secretary Perry. We were on Kodiak Island. We'd flown over there on Alaska Airlines, but to get around the island, you either take a boat or you fly in a float plane. We were flying over to Old Harbor there on Kodiak Island. But that's how we get around, is on the water. Sometimes you don't have the water, though, and in a place like Alaska, what we do have in the wintertime is a fair amount of snow. So you take your floats off and you put your skis on. You can see the wheels there, so this plane can land in Anchorage or take off in Anchorage on the wheels, but when you're up on Ruth Glacier, as this Cessna 185 is, you're landing on skis. That gets your attention a little bit because a little bit different than a float plane, but it gets you in and out of what you need to get in and out of. There are some places, though, where you don't have the airstrip, a float plane can't land, and the only way to really get in and out is by helicopter. Little Diomede Island sits out in the middle of the Bering Straits. It's 2 miles from Big Diomede. Big Diomede is owned by Russia. Little Diomede is owned by us. There's about 150 plus people that live out there on Diomede, have a school, have a community center. But how do you get the mail? How do people move in and out? By helicopter. By helicopter. The mail is delivered by helicopter. There's a few weeks in the wintertime, maybe sometimes as much as a couple months, when the ocean freezes over and they can kind of make a strip where a plane can land on the ice. But most of the year, you fly in and out on helicopter. So we fly. The other way that we get around when you don't have a lot of roads is on our rivers. One thing that Alaska is blessed with is a lot of rivers. We have 365,000 miles of rivers. That makes for a lot of roads, because in the summertime, those rivers are our roads. This is a picture upriver in the village of Napaskiak, about 500 people there. We had the Attorney General Barr, with us in May. We took him upriver. This is how he traveled. This is the Bethel Search and Rescue boats there. They're not fancy boats. They're not yachts. These are functional. They've got decent motors on them because these are workhorses. But this is how we travel in the summer, is up and down these rivers. So in the summer, it makes it possible to move around these communities. In the winter, you move around by snow machine, and you have trucks out there as well. You have vehicles out there. And when the rivers freeze, you now have your frozen highway, and you can have 100 miles. The Kuskokwim, I think, plowed out 250 miles of road on the river. So this is frozen river. This is actually a picture that was taken when we took Secretary Moniz from Bethel to Oscarville. We had about 4 other members of the Senate. We had a field hearing of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. We held it out there in Oscarville, and we had a motorcade on ice. It was basically about 6 trucks going down the river, but the Secretary said it was his first official truck motorcade on ice. But that really does allow us to get around, is when the rivers are frozen over. Down in the southeastern part of the state, where I was born and spent a lot of my growing up years there, these are all islanded communities. There's 32, 33 islanded communities in Southeast, and so the way that we move around, we either fly, Alaska Airlines or smaller carriers, or we rely on our Alaska Marine Highway System, our ferry system. This is our marine lifeline. This is how we move freight, how we move vehicles, how we move goods, how we move people. Right now, our ferry system is threatened on a host of different levels, which really hurts my heart, because as one who knows how dependent we are on being able to move on the water. These types of vessels that can move us in a way that is efficient. This is our road. The marine highway system is our road. So we're working in the state right now to address it. But again, yet one more way that I do my road trips when I'm back home in the state. Now, in the interior, you have communities. Again, these are isolated communities. There's no road system that gets you there. They're small villages. Arctic Village is about 500 people strong. I was in Arctic Village just in July, and this is how you're picked up at the airport. Not a lot of trucks. It's basically four-wheelers. It's ATVs, and everybody just hops on. So this was my driver for the day, and again, just hop on the back and ride. And then there are some communities where really the way that you are getting around is not on a road, not on a sidewalk, but on just a wooden trail, a wooden boardwalk. This is the village of Napaskiak. This is out in the Bethel region in the YK Delta, but it's just planks that are put down on top of the tundra because the area is so muskeggy, it's so marshy that you cannot walk on it. You'd need hip waders and better to travel through it. So just walking around on the boardwalk is the extent of your road trip in a place like Nunamikwa or Napaskiak. Wintertime gives us a little bit more freedom, whether it's freedom to be on a frozen river or freedom to be out on the Arctic Ocean. This is a picture of me with a friend up off of Utqiagvik on the Arctic Ocean. It looks like a lot of fun. We're going out snowmachining. We were going out to work because the community had harvested a whale, and the whaling crew and the community were taking their snow machines out to load the muktuk onto sleds to haul back to the community to be sharing as part of their subsistence food. So we were going out to help the community harvest that whale. So this is not fun and recreation, but this is your means of transportation. This is your workhorse. But we do have a little bit of fun every now and again. Everyone says, well, do you ever travel around by dog sled? That's my dream. That would be the next career opportunity for me. I'd love to run the Iditarod. I'd love to have my own dog team, but right now I don't have enough hours in my day. But every now and again you can hop on the back of a dog sled. So I'm looking forward to being back home, traveling around the state, visiting from Ketchikan to Barrow. It's 4,000 miles for Senator Sullivan, Congressman Young, and I to get back and forth between Washington, D.C. and Alaska. I've kind of mapped out my trip for this month ahead, and once I get back to Alaska in that first couple weeks, I will have doubled that air time, if you will. And then with the additional travel that we have towards the end of August, I'm looking at about 15,000 miles of travel within my state. So I know many of my colleagues are going to exotic locations that take them to places that are a long, long ways away. But I'm just reminded every day of the privilege and the honor to be able to travel in an extraordinary state like Alaska, using a little bit of everything to get us where we need to get to visit some of the finest Americans that I know and that I'm blessed to be able to serve with. With that, Mr. President, I thank you for your time, and I yield the floor.